Hey everybody, welcome to the Script Department. We're talking about Wednesday this week. Check out the podcast for a full-length discussion about this, but for now, Marcus is going to give his short review, spoiler-free. Marcus, take it away.
Thanks, John. So this is one of those things for me that I'm coming into this in an interesting place because I do not have the nostalgic background for the Addams Family. I never really saw it. I saw bits of it, but it never grabbed me in a way that was like, I have to watch the Addams Family all the time. So it wasn't really one of those things. I also am not a massive fan of like the teen drama, and I'm not a massive fan. So like the Riverdales and the things like that, the kind of the CWE sort of thing. I'm not saying that's what this is, but there are overlapping elements there. I find the kind of the supernatural stuff. So I'm going to preface this review by acknowledging the fact that I am not the target market for this, and I'm aware of that, and I think it's important to remain aware of it. But I could if I wanted to. And perhaps we will do in the podcast following this. I could criticize the fact that some of this seems quite obvious, that some of the twists and turns I could have picked out quite early on. I could criticize the fact that Edgar Allan Poe is referenced so many times. My goodness, there are other dark writers out there in the world. Find someone else. I could criticize the fact there are ravens. I could criticize moving statues and robes and secret cults and all these things. But I'm not going to do that, John. I'm not going to do that because I'm a positive person. Like Wednesday Addams is a positive person. So I'm going to try and not do that. The main thing that I found here, pros of this, is I think the setting for this is brilliant. Like the idea of putting a magical school in a Puritan pilgrim town and having those two rubbing up against each other is just it's a great starting point for conflict in your writing and things like that, because I mean so much of that just writes itself, right? It's there, it's lovely, it's great. A lot of the set design, what the first thing that really jumped out at me was that big window when she takes down the colors from it. You've got that wonderful, again, you want to talk about conflict, right? You've got Wednesday Addams is in conflict with everybody in this situation, and they show it through that window. I thought it was a fantastic bit of design work. Performances are pretty good, generally speaking, as well. I mean, there's notably, of course, Wednesday Addams herself is like amazing, and it's a brilliant performance. And I think that contrasts really nicely with what I was saying before about the idea that you have these the kind of CW elements in there and the Riverdale elements. This is elevated above and beyond that in terms of the writing and in terms of the performances and things like that. But what the thing that really grabbed me was, because I kind of floated through this first couple of episodes and I was like, oh, okay, I mean, this is fine. But what grabbed me suddenly in episode 3 is that this show's all about diversity. And it's all about the idea of standing up for marginalized members of society who feel like outcasts, right? And the idea, of course, outcasts being used in this term for pretty much anybody who doesn't fit. There are feminist statements in here. There's racism. There's gender explored, LGBTQ plus community. It's all kind of analogous for those things. And there's this conversation, and I wrote this down. There's a conversation in the episode between Wednesday and the principal. Either we write our story, or they do. And it's the versus the shades of grey argument that the principal's making, of kind of like, you can't just do all of these things the way you want them to. We have to try and live within and without. And it reminded me of of a real life example of the civil rights movement. You look at Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. Think of these two different kind of ideas and ideologies there of, do we smash the system and make something new, or do we try and integrate? And then you look at something like X-Men to find a different view, a kind of a pop culture reference for that. It's the same argument that Charles Xavier and Magneto are having throughout that whole thing. Do we smash them, or do we integrate? And I think it's an interesting conversation that's found there, and it's a lot more depth than I thought was going to happen within that. So it was about that moment, about episode 3, that I suddenly began to notice that, okay, there's something really interesting going on here. Episode 5, you get Enid's exploration of the wolf conversion camp and things like that. The idea of, just accept me for who I am. I'm either I'm going to wolf out or I'm not, but either way, I'm your daughter. Let me be who I am. I thought that there are, if I was going to be critical, I'd say there were moments of it that were where it's a little on the nose. And the idea of a going to a wolf camp and a conversion camp is like, we know what we're getting at there. This is this idea of praying the gay away, to use the terminology that is just disgusting. But that's what they're getting at there, and that's the kind of the horrible element that they're driving at there. But then I noticed something else coming into episode 4, which was that Wednesday Addams is an allegory for somebody with autism. And you can see in so many different ways that she is an outsider. She represents all of these people that do not conform. She sees the world in her way, and her way is not necessarily wrong. It's just different to the way other people see it. She can be very positive. She can be very moving. She can be very. She can also be very critical, and she's described frequently by others as being toxic, and she describes other people as being toxic as well. It's just different. It's just a different thing, and I thought it was a really interesting way of exploring that, and the idea of kind of making people fit into a mold and how that's a bad thing is evident throughout this. They even cast a therapist in an antagonistic role in this thing, and I'm sat in there thinking, yeah, this is all good stuff. They referenced this a spectrum at one point of her power being on a spectrum, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that they another thing I really, along those lines, that I really recognize and appreciate about this, it would have been very easy, as they have done with X-Men movies and things like that, and I won't make that comparison too often here, but there is a stark comparison. There's this feeling of the mutants standing together within the school to fight the outsiders, and certainly in the early episodes of this, they are not united. Bianca is very much against her. She is that school bully. She is all of these things, and they are not a united front whatsoever. And they grow to be. And there's a lovely arc that takes us there. That's really interesting. But I think it's really nice because there are divisions within these neurodivergent, LGBTQ plus, gender identity communities. All of these different communities that of diversity, they have their own. And because everybody does have their own kind of things that people that don't get on with, and that's still prevalent there, which I really, really like. And also, Thing is just the best thing ever. I enjoyed that very much. The sign language, the everybody just kind of understanding him. It's just got Lassie written all over it, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. Oh, what do you mean? Somebody stuck down a well? Absolutely brilliant. I'm a massive, massive fan of that. However, in the sense of being fair, there are criticisms here as well, I found. So the idea of, to pick up on that main thread of the positive stuff that I found there, the idea of diversity and inclusion and things like that, I found it quite interesting once I picked up on that theme, that the very first thing, or one of the very first things you see, is somebody walking Wednesday Addams through and going, oh, here are the different identities of groups. Here are the vampires, here are the werewolves, here are the sirens, here are the kind of cliques within this world. And it's interesting because my understanding of the Addams family, and again, I may be showing ignorance here, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is that they aren't really like anything necessarily. They're just kind of creepy people that are, just kind of creepy. I don't think they're like witches or wizards or vampires or anything like that.
I do think Morticia is meant to be a witch.
She's meant to be a witch, okay.
Yeah, I think I like,
but not.
I can't remember the name of the guy who drives the car. Like, he's a Frankenstein monster, I think, and the fact that. But the fact that Thing exists at all means there is that supernatural kind of component to their family. Sure. That's how I've always looked at it.
Absolutely, but not expressly stated, this is a family of witches, or this is a family of this, or this is a family of that.
No, I think the idea is that when it was originally pitched, it's like the Munsters. Yeah. It's basically, this is a family of multi-faceted beings that we can just draw on from different tapestries. Like, yeah.
So I'm kind of right there then, because the idea that you go from this kind of multifaceted family of just people that are different things within the supernatural world, not clearly defined, just sort of supernatural and creepy. And then you drop into this situation, the idea of walking through and going, these are the werewolves, these are the vampires, these are this. And you're kind of like pigeonholing people into specific supernatural groups, which I do think somewhat, and I am nitpicking a little bit here, but it does somewhat undercut the message of, allowing people to be who they are without anything else, because you are actually pigeonholing people. You're going, well, you're a vampire. oh, you're a werewolf, and things like that. Though I would say that I think the idea of calling the Gorgons stoners is an absolutely genius move. It's a fantastic idea. I really, really laughed hard at that when I twigged that's what they were talking about. Also, right. So the main kind of thread that goes through all of this is the idea of Wednesday. She's writing her novel, and it kind of allows for this voiceover thing to happen. Now, regular viewers will know that I really, really, really hate voiceover, and this does not work for me in any way, because you have this vague idea that she's writing a novel, and yet the voiceover references the fact that she's writing the novel. So it's not a fact that her internal voice is like she's typing what's happening. It's not a journal. It's not a diary. It's nothing like that. She's just, it's actually nothing to do with the novel in any way, shape, or form, but it's kind of vaguely framed as if it is. And there's a moment in, I think, episode 6 or 7, I think, where she actively goes, "I'm having difficulty writing my novel today." And it's like, well, you're not writing that in your novel, are you? So what is this? What is this framing device? Is this a thing or is it not? So I struggle with that a little bit. I wonder if maybe they're looking for a noir kind of vibe in the detective sort of thing. They're trying to pull on some of those threads, perhaps, but I don't think there's enough noir. I don't think there are enough noir.
I think they're absolutely going for the small town local sheriff has to team up with the unexpected kind of Enola Holmes type character. Like that was kind of how I looked at it. In fact, when we were watching it, I was at one point, I think Michaela said to me, wouldn't you love it? Because we just watched Enola Holmes and we really loved it. And I think she said, do you think Netflix will do an Enola Holmes Wednesday crossover? And I was thinking, you could do an amazing crossover just for once. Like, that makes no sense. That's not canon. That doesn't make any sense in the world that it functions in. But you can imagine Sherlock coming to this town. That would be cool. And everybody and Enola coming with him and all that kind of stuff, or just Enola. But so I definitely think they're leaning into that.
I just don't know. I don't know if there's enough. I don't know if there's enough noir-y kind of there to make it work, or maybe it's my bias against voiceover showing that I'm very willing to accept the fact that might be all this is in there. Generally speaking, I think it's really enjoyable. There are a few things that didn't quite work for me, but as I say at the top of this, I'm fully aware that these could be genre biases coming into play rather than objective stuff. So objectively, I enjoyed it. It's a well-written piece, and interested to see what happens next. So there's my review.
Yeah, I really love this show. I think it was absolutely amazing from top to bottom. And I do think, it gets a little carried away at the end. But I had so much fun with this. I can't wait for the second season.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to hear the rest of what we have to say about this, you can head over to our longer podcast discussion. Wherever you get your podcast, just search for The Script Department, hit the links in the description of the video, and we will be having our full-length conversation about Wednesday. We'll be back with another review soon. Keep it here at The Script Department. Thanks.